George Musey on paradigm shift in TV. And what's interesting about what's happening now in 1952, the TV as a medium absolutely accelerated. The only thing that we've ever seen penetrate America, and even the programming followed suit. The situation comedy was the signature medium, the signature content type for television, and all of that came out of the cultural moment. And I use all of that, this little mini lecture, sort of to set the stage for understanding what we're about to see. We're really seeing the diffusion of a great social and cultural moment. As we start seeing all of this content move across screens, the very definition of TV moving away from what had been for 50, 75 years even, a real defining ritual in American life, is now moving across screens and moments. That entire shift is going to be fundamental, not only to the way people view this stuff, but also the way it's going to be made, the way we start thinking about content. If the situation comedy and the variety show were the signature content types of post-war American life and TV, what are the signature content types going to be of this kind of distribution and this kind of cultural moment? I just plant that idea to you to sort of set the stage and understand how fundamental a change we're about to see. It's not just going to be TV as we've known it. We really are at the beginning of a transformation of creativity and thinking about this medium. And I use that to set up George Musey, who is going to talk to us about TV as a paradigm shift, especially in the ways in which we conceive TV and measure it and account and understand audiences. George is the SVP and head of analytics and insight at Optimedia Blue 449. This is a new agency that is one of the 4 new agencies that Publicis Media Network has formed in its new reorganization. George has been with us many times before over the years. He has served similar roles at Mindshare and at Kantar Group. Please welcome George Musey.
Good morning. How's everybody doing? Good? No hangovers? No. I didn't drink, but. All right. The way I usually try to do these presentations is kind of go through a story of sorts, and through that story, I present some of my thoughts, right or wrong, and then I would like to have a discussion about what you guys think about the perspectives that I bring, and I've seen this industry grow from many different perspectives. I've sat on the ad tech side, I've sat in the research side, I've sat in the management consulting side. I've sat in an agency side, I've sat in the advertiser side, and through all those kind of disciplines and scenarios, I've tried to look at it and says, what does it really mean for our industry moving forward and the fundamental things that we've been trying to do and still will try to do in the foreseeable future. So it's very hard to argue that we've not experienced a fragmentation at the rate that we've historically not seen. I mean, there's been fragmentation before in that industry. So you have TV, as Steve said, was kind of the first big paradigm shift, and then cable fragmented TV, and then PCs or digital fragmented cable, and then mobile fragmented everything. And now you have further fragmentation that is happening, ironically, back into TV. So you have this notion of TV fragmentation. So the way I describe TV these days is not even close to the old description of TV. So I consider TV to be a platform made up of component parts, similar to what any other platform has, similar to what digital has or mobile has. It is now a construct of many different platforms. So you have, because of that fragmentation, you have this proliferation of video-enabled devices. A lot of different devices, platform screens that consumers can now engage with whatever they want to engage with. So you've had this kind of shift in relationship, right? So historically, we've had a one-to-many relationship. So we had appointment-based viewing, we had familial gathering of groups to watch favorite shows. It was very clear, it was very reliable, it was very predictable. And now we have this notion of many to one. So because of this proliferation of this fragmentation of what we're seeing this relationship now go from many to one, from one to many. So now TV is just another screen. It's not the primary screen, it's not the first screen, it's just another screen. Within that screen, you have multiple entities that define it, but it's just another screen that consumers will decide when to engage with it, how to engage with it. The other thing that has happened is that viewing of television is no longer bound to the home. Right? You can be anywhere to consume content, your content. Doesn't matter where you need to be. Right? So there's no more sitting in the couch. There is no more, yes, we still do that, and there's still a lot of time that is spent in the living room or the bedroom with family members to be able to consume that. But there is no more time-bound or location-bound consumption of TV. So you have this notion of a multi-screen reality, right? So you have multiple convergent screens coming together to form an experience, which is very important. So you have 4 major primary screens, but each one of these screens could further be fragmented out into component parts. So although you have 4 major screens, you have probably about 8 or 9 that kind of form into these 4 primary. So now you have this notion of the age of the customer or the consumer, right? So now we've come to the age where us, right? It's about us, and it's about consumers, and it's about people. It's no longer a relationship that we lead, it's a relationship that they dictate. So we have this notion of consumer evolution. So you have these things that are about what, when, where, why, and how, right? So what's happened because of this consumer kind of evolution is that we have so many different choices about where the media can be consumed, right? So what do I want to consume? When do I want to consume it? Where? Why? Right? Is it a premiere show? Is it a prime show? Is it a thing that I'm catching up on? Is it a binge watching, or is it anything else? And how, right? My choice of location and platform and the interchange between when I start in one and finish in the other or go back to another, right, allows that flexibility of choice. Because of this, we transcend. So consumers now transcend screens, moments, places, in the pursuit of content. That's a major kind of opportunity, but a major obstacle to a lot of things. To fully realize the value of video, we need to figure out how to be at the same pace of what consumers are doing today. So you now have this definition, as Steve alluded to. So what's the definition of TV, right? So my perspective is that if we don't confuse the content from the device, then the definition of TV is where I choose to consume content, irrespective of device or platform. So the definition of TV and that experience of TV and programs and sight, sound, and motion, it's my choice how I define TV, by the way I experience it, by the way I consume it. And what you also have because of that is the blurring of lines, where some might say there are no more lines. There are no more pillars. There are no more clear definitions of where one starts and one stops. The consumers have been operating like this for quite a bit, right? Their definition of video is video. They don't consider TV to be TV. They don't consider it to be watching a program on Netflix or watching a program on Netflix on a mobile app or a smart TV app or a gaming console. They just consider it to be TV. It's their choice of entry. So we have this blurring of lines. What happens because of these blurring of lines is that we need to rethink or kind of reframe the train of thought that we have about video and what video means to us versus what video means to consumers. And we need to make that adjustment quite quickly in order to fully realize the potential of what this brings to us as agencies that have marketers as our clients. Because again, the fundamental goal of what we do and what marketers expect us to do have not changed. It's the same ask that was 200 years ago, and it will be the same ask 200 years from now, right? We still need to reach consumers, the right consumers, in the right platform, in the right mindset, with the right message, so we can get them in a certain mindset and put a message where it should hopefully resonate with them, so we can get them to take a desired behavior, which is always sales, right? That is our goal, right? And it's important that we kind of change the way we think about video in order for us to set ourselves up to get to a place that we can fulfill on that request. So we need to fuse our thinking. So we need to fuse thinking about the notion of TV and digital coming together, fuse our thinking specifically about what TV and the component parts of TV. So I don't consider it to be OTT digital, I consider it to be OTT just part of TV, and TV is all video, as it is video that sits across any other entity that a consumer decides to go. So we need to fuse thinking to bridge traditional TV and emerging TV, and then bridge those platforms against the video platforms that exist in what we consider to be traditional digital video. The goal here is to really get to a systematic approach, right? So currently we still have a lot of silos. So we still operate in a divergent kind of area, right? And that's in agency world, that's in ad tech, that's in marketers. But the desire and the goal should be to take the systematic approach to video. The benefit of that is now we can deal with the complexity of what video is, because it is quite complex. If it was easy, we would have figured it out by now. It's not easy for multiple different reasons, different perspectives that sit within agencies, marketers, ad tech, measurement companies, walled gardens, the desire or the resistance to change because we don't want to disrupt business models, or we haven't figured out what the right business model is in order to value those audiences and content. But we have to be able to think differently in order to maximize that or realize the maximal kind of value that this new paradigm that we live in today brings. If we do that, we solve this maze. So right now it is a maze, even within just the TV itself. If you account for linear TV, VOD, SVOD, connected TV, smart TVs, streaming devices, gaming consoles, and anything that falls within that spectrum, it is a maze. Even just within the smart TV environment, because we have to work with multiple publishers' apps, it becomes a maze. What this kind of shift has unfortunately created is this inaccurate and incomplete measurement, which is very important for us to solve sooner than later, in order for us to understand audiences holistically, both breadth and depth of understanding, as well as understanding advertising, because at the end of the day, our job is to serve messages by our ability to understand those audiences and those behaviors and those attitudes and those typologies and those segmentations in order for us to put content where we feel that the audience will most engage with. But unfortunately, again, through the combination multiple players in the market, we find ourselves with a very inaccurate and incomplete picture. But like all things, and I'll take TV's ability to adapt consistently through its evolution, measurement has to adapt as well. If not, for example, if Nielsen doesn't adapt, or ComScore doesn't adapt, or Google or Facebook, or anybody else that has a vested interest in monetizing video, then we're going to be in a very precarious position about how we are able to do our jobs. So this notion of adaptation follows every player in the industry, including agencies and marketers. It's in our best interest to force the adaptation of measurement for this current paradigm that we live in. That adaptation has to account for the full spectrum, at least the things that we know today and the things that are going to be emerging in the short order. So one of those things, or a couple of those things, are going to be cars. There's a lot of screens in cars. At what point do they become an ability to watch content? Hopefully not when you're driving. The connected home, so refrigerators now would have TVs on them. At what point can people just watch content on that screen? And then at what point do we serve ads against that content? So its ability to be able to start accounting for all these spectrums. We do that, we close this critical gap. So there is a critical gap today about what consumers are doing versus what we want to be able to understand and value, and to be able to plan, target, measure, optimize against. The notion of TV viewership shifting rapidly is probably a big understatement. Unfortunately, that same pace of how the industry has been able to change measurement is nowhere near that pace. So we have a very dynamic and rapid pace of viewing behavior change. Fortunately, measurement is more like a snail's pace. It feels that way sometimes, honestly. So there's a couple of things that that in order for us to kind of set ourselves up for success as we look to adapt and evolve measurement for total video. Somebody mentioned yesterday, we'll definitely need a hybrid approach. So panel plus census is going to be key. One versus the other is not going to work. We need both. We need panels to be able to calibrate. We need them large enough to be able to calibrate against everything that we can possibly do. And we need census to be able to give us the depth of understanding so we can reliably measure and project out what we think will happen. And then we need to look at a shift away from just, I'll call them legacy metrics or legacy indicators. So legacy being a GRP and legacy being audience or demo. I still fundamentally believe that audience has to be part of the mix. Any segmentation that you do, age and gender are two of the 7 ingoing variables. Without age and gender, you have no segmentation that will ever come to fruition. So they're very important from an audience understanding. GRPs, reach and frequency, no matter what we do, we're still going to need to reach people with messages, right? So repetition and reinforcement, so that relationship will not go away. But it needs to evolve to account for more of what's happening in order for us to get a much deeper and broader understanding of the consumer decision journey. So the first thing that I would like to see is this notion of working under the see, kind of think and do mentality, right? So try to incorporate as much of that into the relationship as possible, so people see, we get them exposed, whatever that effective frequency threshold is. Hopefully they will think in a way that is beneficial to us, and then they will act. And this construct is not new. It kind of manifests itself under the, if you've ever come across the hierarchy of effects in communication, it comes from there, right? There is a process that needs to happen in order for us to fully realize this relationship with consumers. But I also would like to see this evolve even further to account for exposure, response, engagement, perception, and outcome. I think engagement is a very important component of this. No matter how you define engagement, I think we touched upon it a little bit yesterday, maybe time is and should be an ingoing variable for engagement. Exactly how we do that consistently in common across devices and platforms will be interesting. Our ability to truly tease out attention will be important. Attention plus engagement will be important, and then follow it through. So if we try to get to this type of framework, we'll have a better understanding of how effective our campaigns are, and there'll be a better understanding of how do we maximize that relationship across the consumer decision journey. Data is going to be very important, obviously, right? Our ability to leverage data, both breadth and depth, is going to be important. Not every piece of data, but the most relevant data sources that we need to be able to get to that framework will be important. Data will give us the ability to understand context of the consumer, which is important. Putting them into context is a critical thing. So data in itself is good, but it's not great. Knowledge is the ultimate kind of desired state of data. Understanding consumers in context is kind of the epiphany of that desire. So we have an ecosystem, we have consumers, we want to tease out our target audience. It's extremely important that we have the right data sources integrated, connected, for us to be able to do this holistically, and then to be able to translate this back into each platform or device for us to understand its potential by itself, and then its relationship to all other devices. The core enabler to that, and I think we talked about this yesterday as well, is going to be some version of a graph or some version of an ID or something that connects all these devices. There's a critical necessity to be able to bridge all these platforms, to be able to have that connected view, to be able to leverage that data fully, to be able to properly value what each piece of the total video pie brings to the relationship is going to be extremely difficult to get to if we don't have this device graph or this device ID or something of that nature that allows us to connect these tissues. There'll be a combination, whatever that fair balance between scale and accuracy will be. There'll be a combination of deterministic and probabilistic data. Not sure if we'll come to a consensus about what that right balance is, but I think we'll differ based on vertical, differ based on campaign, differ based on level of risk that people want to take on. But I think we'll have to do that in order to, again, fully realize the ecosystem. Once we have that, we'll have to use the breadth of analytics that we have to our disposal. And if you guys have ever come across the analytical maturity model, it gets visualized in many different ways. This is my way of saying that in order for us to fully manifest all that data and fully extract the value of all that data, we'll have to go through a process. And that process will be in 3 steps or 4 steps. It will tell us the what, it will tell us the why and the so what, and it will tell us the what next. So you're looking at implications, recommendations, hypotheses, definitely insights and narratives, but it will get us through that notion of what has happened in history, what do I know because of history in the present, and what do I feel confident in guiding or counseling to the future. Our ability to get to integrated models or response models is also key. How we evolve or how these things get evolved to account for the multiple definitions of video will be critical, because we have to, in order to value each one, in order to understand it, in order to create the right balance and relationship, we're going to have to value it based on realism, right? Not based on what we think it does, but based on what the data is telling us that it is doing and its potential to do. So when you look at everything through kind of the story, we're seeing the notion of evolution happening. So TV is definitely evolving. It will continually evolve. It's really, really, really good at adapting, right? It's proven its resilience through history. If you look at everything that we read in the press and the trades about video consumption increasing, the majority of that, I will say, is probably because at the direction or the drive of TV. Unfortunately, we don't have reliable measurement systems to tell us how many people are engaging with all these platforms, because although yes, there is people engaging with TV in mobile and desktop and tablets, the vast majority of that, once we have this measurement system in place, we'll see that the majority of those people are actually, in fact, engaging TV. And once that definition comes out, well, we will get to a place where TV viewership has not gone down. TV viewership defined in all these different ways has significantly gone up. Even the big screen, we will see that the viewership has gone up. I mean, Netflix and Hulu both said in their last upfronts that at least 80%, if not more than that, of their content is being consumed on the TV. So if we fundamentally believe that those two guys are a pretty good indication of what's happening from cord cutters or cord nevers, or the migration of audiences away from the traditional definition of TV, then that means that they're watching TV on TV, except they're choosing their entry point. And all these things, I usually try to put it into perspective about what this really means. So there's a massive opportunity for us to fully value TV through that understanding. So it's not declining, it's not going away. It's got massive opportunity. It just, we just don't have everything we need yet in order to fully understand it and fully benefit from it. If we get to that state, ideally sooner than later, then we'll deliver on the relationship that we always say we are, right? So we have this relationship that has to happen in order for us to basically deliver on the promise, right? So we need to reach consumers, we need to reach them enough times. So whatever that is, we need to influence their opinion and we need to impact their behavior. So this relationship will always be there. So this is the blueprint that I always work off of. What the starting point and the end point will never change. What has changed and what we need to fully get to a place of understanding is the middle. So we have a lot of things that drive consumers' behavior. We know some of them, we don't know all of them, we haven't connected enough of them in order to understand how they influence how, when, how much, the consumer decision journey. So once we get that understanding, we'll be able to, as best as we can, optimize this relationship for us to be able to get a marketer to reach that desired consumer and make that desired impact, which is sales. Right, so what hopefully I've communicated to you is that I fundamentally believe that I think if you think about the content and not the device, it's a very concrete definition. We just need to be able to put aside kind of varying, for whatever reason, varying perspectives and varying kind of conflicting perspectives. Get the players that sit on technology, data, analytics at the table in order to create some level of commonality for us to be able to sit there and plan effectively, invest effectively, measure effectively, optimize effectively, so we can fully realize this potential of total video, which there is massive, massive, massive opportunity out there. We're seeing some hiccups along the road. I mean, we're seeing some brands admitting that they've over-leveraged themselves in digital video. Some brands admitting that they're not taking enough position in emerging TV. Obviously, the Facebook's making an 80% corrective measure doesn't help that discussion, but there is definitely appetite there. But I think there's a lot more scrutiny that is happening these days about how dollars are ultimately allocated across every single video environment. That's why we need to create these measurement frameworks in order to bring back confidence and trust to what we do, and the brands fundamentally believe that we, as agencies and their partners, in conjunction with our partners, can help them fully manifest this relationship. And that's it.
Thank you, George. We have time for questions. George? Yep.
George, great presentation. Thank you. What would you say is the biggest barrier to having better measurement? Is it we don't have enough data? Is it because we're really relying on Comscore and Nielsen? There are not enough companies collecting data? Is it we don't have the right definitions? I mean, if you, sitting where you are, could say, what is the highest priority that would improve this in terms of getting better measurement, what would it be?
Yeah, so I think it's kind of a combination of a lot of factors. So Nielsen, you still need a third-party auditor. We can't create many different versions of currency. So, I mean, everybody in this room can create some version of money, but that doesn't value the money equally, and my definition of money against somebody else's definition of money is not consistent. So we need a third-party measurement that has no vested interest in this to be able to tell us the value of things and what the currency really means. If that's Nielsen or that's Comscore, I fundamentally believe that at some point, maybe 5-7 years from now, there'll be a consortium of sorts. So and part of that consortium will be Google and whoever's left around. But there has to be. Now, I don't think Google can be trusted to be able to unbiasedly provide level of intelligence and currency or anything else. But given their position in the industry and what they see and what they have access to, they should definitely be an enabler of that. But you still need somebody to audit it. But the desired change of companies like Nielsen and Comscore, Rentrak, Kantar, they're not moving fast enough. My criticism of them and what I see as kind of the worst case scenario is that this divide between where we are and where we need to be increases to a point where we can't transcend it anymore. Like, we can't create a bridge to be able to get to where we need to be. That's obviously the doomsday scenario. But even at the rate of what Nielsen has done in the last 5 years, which is significantly more than they've done in the previous 20, even though ComScore and RentTrack and Kantar have come together, even that relationship has taken too long to manifest. But we need them to get to a place where they can account for the majority. So I'm not asking for perfection, right? I don't think that's even possible at this stage. But enough of an understanding and enough of a measurement framework where we can go in there and say, okay, so I know this much, I don't know the other thing. But I know enough being more than half or 75% of what we need to know. And I'm okay with having less visibility in the remaining, and I can account for that in what I do. Right now, I feel we're probably less than half of where we need to be. So working with less than half of what you need and trying to account for 50% of what you don't have, it's not an easy relationship to value. We have a lot of data. Do we need more data? Yes, and it's hard for me to say, but we need data that's connected, right? So I do have aspirations but fears, given where I sit, of what the clouds are doing. It's an interesting position that they're taking, a lot of money to be able to. I think that's critically important, but because we are where we are, and you know, if you're an agency, I would look at them as a competitor. If not already, they definitely will be soon, but I think they are already. They're getting to where we need to be because of their scale and their pockets that they have. But again, is it to their best interest, and only their best interest, versus is it the best interest of the ecosystem? Do we benefit from it? Do our clients benefit from it? Or is it just benefit them like Google or Facebook or anybody else, right? So I think that'll be interesting. I just want to be able to get to a place where we understand behavior, one. So I can easily say that if I had to spend $100 million across total video, what's the best way for me to do that because of the potential and opportunity, right? And the threshold, right? Some of these places we didn't even know what the threshold is, if any. How do I do that, first and foremost, and then follow that relationship forward? So how do I get to understanding of value, or engagement? How do I understand the value, perception, understanding the value, outcome? How do I get to those additive layers so I can then create an equation that says, if the goal of total video is to drive sales, and I have an understanding of that relationship, then I can weight it accordingly to my client, what their desire is, what their budget is, what their audience is. That is the ultimate kind of ideal state. It's a challenge to do that. We're trying to do it with many different pieces and Scotch tape and proxies, which is good, but it's not the best way of doing it, because there's a lot of uncertainty in that, and there's really not a consistent or scalable way to repeat that.
George, thank you very much. George is going to be extending this into one of the roundtables at the end of the morning. Thanks very much, George Missy. And let me ask Evan and our teas. At the same time, we're watching the ways in which the networks are trying to maintain their walled gardens, even as there's pressure from outside to further standardize a lot of the data. To take up this issue of the walled gardens and the ways in which data is working into advanced TV, taking lead is an old friend of ours, Evan Barocas, who's the director of display advertising at Pointit. He leads the in-house programmatic ad buying team. Has worked with on global brand awareness for brands like Microsoft's online store, Amazon FBA, and AT&T Developer. Please welcome Evan and the panel.
Thank you so much. And this has just been an incredible conference. So thank you so much for the MediaPost team for inviting us and for throwing this on. I've learned so much over the last couple of days, and there's been a couple of themes that keep coming up, and I think we're going to talk about this kind of recurring theme of, I think George literally just talked about it really in depth in an interesting way, but this idea of how if the user's consumer experience or the way in which they're consuming content is becoming less fragmented, more across devices, our buying practices kind of have to follow that. And how do we then look at that user and then be able to buy advertising across different mediums, across different devices, across different walled gardens, and be able to maintain the same view of the user across all of these different mediums. And to help me with this conversation is Keith, Carly, and Michael. If you guys could introduce yourself and then maybe tell us which walled garden you guys spend the most time consuming content from. For me, it's probably a combination of Facebook and Google, but I probably spend the most time behind Comcast, unfortunately. So.
So hi, I'm Carly. I work. Is this on? Probably hear me anyway. So working at Razorfish, I work across a lot of digital savvy clients, and definitely have walled gardens and TV and digital. But being digitally focused, it's mostly Google and Facebook from an advertising perspective, but also from a consumer perspective.
Keith Johnson with, Keith Wonderman, head of strategy, data, and analytics. And in terms of walled gardens, we definitely have some within television, but I think our biggest challenge today is actually with Facebook. Just the lack of data out in terms of what we get provides a consistent day-to-day challenge.
Hello, I'm Mike Piner, SVP of Strategic Investment for Magna, and I think the walled garden that I personally spend the most time in is Google. And obviously, I think walled gardens are emerging in some new places and some very traditional places, particularly linear TV, which is now creating an additional challenge for us, for sure.
Sure. So George, I think, touched on a couple of the major issues that having that walled gardens can present. What I would like to do is kind of define what a walled garden is from both a data perspective and also from an inventory perspective. And then what are some of the major challenges those present to buying and also maintaining an audience-centric approach to advertising. So if you guys just wanted to tackle that entire subject.
So from walled garden, so Facebook specifically, I mean, to your point, is that they take a lot of data in. They don't necessarily let data come out. So a lot of our clients are hesitant to kind of share data, especially with first-party data, because they're not totally comfortable with how it's used. But I also think there's a big challenge in being consumer-centric and have a holistic measurement where walled gardens don't have the same, they don't allow all the same pixels or the same third-party tracking, so they're not always included in your overall kind of measurement solution, or from a reporting perspective, they're kind of off in their own little world, so you do have to take those insights directionally. It's a different methodology, it's a different way of counting. So when you're looking at your kind of cross-channel approach or holistic approach, it's kind of taking them with a grain of salt in their own way of measuring and reporting.
Yeah, I guess I would agree with what you just said there. For Wonderman, we take an audience-first based approach to how we plan and buy media across all channels. And when you have a walled garden, at least today, we're still able to effectively reach into those walled gardens in terms of buying media. The challenge that we have really is getting the data back out in terms of measurement, so we can have one common form of measurement across all platforms.
Yeah, I agree with what these guys both just said. I would say that, overall, I think, we just need a, horizontal view across everything, measurement included, and able to buy effectively across all screens. And I think with the walled gardens going up, we're creating silos and verticals, and it's becoming very challenging. I think right now we have no choice but to try and work within those walled gardens as best we can, kind of connecting them as we simultaneously try to break them down through the business side. So that's primarily what we are focusing on at Magna and through partnerships. And I think on day one, we talked a little bit about bringing the audience-based approach into the upfront and programmatic into these upfront conversations. And I think that that's something that we view as very important, and we've already started that. I think it will evolve differently than the traditional upfront, and those conversations will be different because it's purchased and executed in a very different way. You can't just hand it over and say, here's your inventory, and here it is for the year, and the inventory needs to be sourced a different way and executed in a different way. So there needs to be that flexibility involved, but still, we're going to need to find a way to source inventory to buy in this new way.
Gotcha. Now, those are definitely very consistent challenges, right? Like we all put data in. We'll use Facebook as an example, and I don't want to necessarily pick on them, but we put data in to Facebook, and it's really challenging to both measure what's happening there through a third party or actually get data out to then kind of understand how that user's interacting across multiple different channels. Are there any opportunities in that? Does that present any strategic opportunities to be able to better leverage Facebook data in a way that you wouldn't necessarily be able to if Facebook, let's say, were to break down their walled garden, and then all of a sudden they're going to, let's say, open source their data, but you would get a worse quality of data from Facebook at that point? Are there any strategic opportunities to there being walled gardens?
I would say yes. I mean, one of our opportunities is to use data as a strategic advantage for our clients. So we always want to have an asymmetrical advantage, right? We want to have more data, more intelligence than our competitors have. So to the extent that there are walled gardens today, is that create an opportunity? Absolutely. It's just a very costly one.
Yeah, and I think it's just working around the silos. We have silos by channel, we have silos by discipline, whether it's across different screens or it's across display, TV, and search. And I think walled gardens kind of is a whole nother silo in itself, and I think it's just trying to understand our consumer, putting them at the forefront and really understanding what their mindset is and how to approach that in a holistic way. So same as what the role is in the overall ecosystem. So from a social perspective versus a TV perspective versus a mobile perspective, it's not having those individual strategies, but kind of what is the role in our brand and taking that into account as you're kind of planning and using the data.
Yeah, and that's a great point because it's not necessarily a buying challenge, it's a measurement challenge for us being able to understand our audience a little bit better and how our advertising is impacting them. So what do those measurement frameworks look like for us to be able to I think George mentioned it really correctly, kind of create a blended approach to how we can both quantitatively and qualitatively understand how our advertising is impacting consumers and driving an end action. I'm a very performance-oriented marketer. I've got performance-oriented clients, so I have to really understand how every ad dollar that I'm spending is contributing to an end action. So what are some of those measurement frameworks and strategies look like, especially when we're looking at a Facebook, a Google, a Comcast, and all the walled gardens that we have to advertise across?
I would just say that for our clients, the measurement of success is actually sale of more goods. So despite what anybody says about brand lift, brand loyalty, at the end of the day, that has to translate in terms of dollars and what was actually being sold. So no matter what we do, we try and measure it back to sales.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think that's a great way of thinking, and I think that it's incredibly powerful to bring that kind of thinking to television. However, I do think that, it's important to know, that the long-term brand building that is needed in order to drive those short-term sales and, keeping that, understanding that that is important as well. And, not shifting too much in the other direction, but I think that there's a lot that can be brought, having these concepts brought to television investment teams in particularly. I think, who have primarily just, their KPI is just reach and frequency and awareness primarily. But I think that they need to understand how that works with audience-based buying and how they can strive for better metrics. And I think education is key in educating them to moving those dollars over. I think that there's standardization, to me, that's needed. I think, I've spent a lot of my career in national television investment, obviously, so I bring a different perspective, hopefully, to this conference. And, I will tell you that, I've been in the GRP world for a long time. And, I think that is viewed by many as television's greatest weakness, right? But I think it's now kind of becoming its greatest strength because there's a standardization there, and a standardization in television that's existed for a long time. Everything in television has been standardized, from the GRP to the 30-second spot, to timing, to when you get post reports, to everything. So I think we were talking about, over the course of this conference, moving, for example, linear TV dollars to OTT, and we were very adamantly saying it should come from linear TV dollars, but I think that these teams need to be educated and understand the different metrics that can be applied to this, and in a way standardizing it so it's easy for them to understand, and it's easy for clients that have purchased television for a long time to understand. And I think that will start to move things quicker. Once the dollars are moved, then we can sort of go in different avenues and apply different metrics and whatever. So.
I think it's really important to know the role of the channel and what the influence has on your consumer. And ultimately, everybody wants to drive sales or drive revenue, but you have your business objectives, but to have distinct KPIs is really important. So to the earlier points made is TV is never going anywhere. It's the biggest screen. You have to reach your audience in a massive way, but as you kind of go through the consumer journey and understanding the different touch points, having distinct KPIs of how to reach them and influence them in a certain way, from a awareness perspective down to driving consideration and getting them to engage with your brand, to them being more favorable and actually considering to take an action, all the way down to making that sale. And I think understanding the role is making a difference in a lot of our clients, because I have a lot of performance-based clients as well that is always trying to optimize towards the CPA or optimizing towards a certain revenue goal, where you can't do those big, impactful, or more expensive video executions, because if you're limited to a cost per sale, cost per acquisition, you tend to optimize out of that. But understanding that there is a halo effect that is going to influence your consumer, it's going to soften the marketplace and change their mindset. That understanding that you can pay a certain price for that is really, really important. And then obviously, as you move down the funnel, your acquisitions will become more efficient. And then also, I think as the world is changing to addressable TV and using more data is expensive. So although you're more targeted, your cost pers get more expensive, and kind of understanding where the value of that is too, and what are you willing to risk in order to learn. So new spaces are definitely evolving every day, and as we get more fragmented and there is more opportunity for the consumer to consume content, is understanding how do we test and learn. What's your roadmap? It's important.
It's like another theme of this entire conference, right? It's TV to digital and then digital to TV, and how both these sides are trying to bridge that gap. I thought that image that George used in his presentation was really, I think, accurate, where you're sitting on one side of the bridge looking at digital and being like, well, we've standardized everything on this side of the bridge, and you guys need to standardize everything on your side. And we're looking at you saying, well, we have these third-party verification tools that we have that we've built over the last couple of years, that we have a lot of trust and faith in, and we want to find a common language. And so I definitely agree that TV is a more mature medium than digital is right now, for sure. And the GRP has done a great job in standardizing that medium. But if it doesn't extend into digital, does it enable that audience-first approach? Like, if you're not able to measure across mediums using that same measurement framework, is that necessarily accomplishing the goal of keeping the audience at the center of your advertising?
I think it's hard too, because it's the more granular you get, or the smaller the screen, the more complex it gets. So TV kind of started in one era, and then it got to display, and which obviously got more nuanced than TV, and then now mobile with different apps and different browsers is even more complex than display. So I think every time you're kind of moving more in a diverse kind of screen world, you're getting more complex measurement needs, which is why there's so many kind of challenges with trying to have a holistic measurement solution.
Yeah, and I would just say our goal is to be media agnostic, right? So the question is, what's going to be most effective? What will give us the right reach? What is going to give the results for the brand that we're working on regardless? And that really goes back to having a common way to say, look, we're going to reach individuals across all of their different devices. That includes the set-top box in your home. It includes your tablet and your mobile phone. It includes all of those things, and things which we haven't even yet invented.
Gotcha. I mean, and so to be able to accomplish that, you have to pick kind of your inventory. You have to pick the way in which you're going to accomplish that, whether it's through a Facebook or through a Google or through some type of deterministic way to be able to keep the user at the center of all of those devices, whether it's a device graph. And something that, and I told Brian I was going to quote him earlier so that he's not caught off guard, but something he said yesterday when he was up here I thought was really interesting when he was asked about walled gardens, and he said, fewer, bigger, better. I thought that was a really interesting way of framing that, where instead of trying to piece together a strategy that bridges all of them, you just pick the couple that are going to best accomplish your marketing objective, and ensure, and then hope that they have the scale to be able to do it. And so a question I've been kind of like mulling over is that if I was in the publisher seat, or if I was inside of one of these walled gardens, if I was at Facebook, or if I was an addressable TV network, if I was looking at this from their perspective, am I running a big risk by being a walled garden over the next 5 years?
Depends how big you are.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's an interesting question. I didn't really think about it in that way, but that more of a risk. But I think they're looking at it as an advantage, or really safety. You know, I think when you kind of look, you know, from 20,000 feet at the business and everything that's going on, I mean, it's tough to be in the agency business right now. I mean, there's a tremendous pressure on costs, and that doesn't seem to be changing with all of these reviews. A majority of them are coming down to cost, and a lot of that is television costs against the GRP. As much as we don't want to get out of it, it is. At the same time, supply is diminishing, and people are cutting the cord. They're slimming down on the cord, so they're losing subscription revenues on the television side, and there is a tremendous pressure now on ad sales teams to maximize revenue for every single avail that goes out the door. And you know, we saw that happen actually not this summer, but last summer. Really, that supply erosion really start to catch up, and really the pressure being ramped up on those teams. So I think, you know, we're trying to use, you know, audience-based buying and programmatic for two different reasons, and they're at odds with each other. You know, on the agency side, we're trying to use it to unlock value, undervalued inventory that we can purchase cheaper and more efficient for our clients, that's more targeted and more effective at achieving sales goals and whatever. And then they're trying to do the exact opposite now. I think we were a little ahead of the game on the agency side in using data and understanding these audiences and whatever, but now they are rapidly trying to get their handle on all these data sets and understand these audiences and what's valuable to our advertisers, so they could charge more for that inventory that is valuable. And so I think that, you know, that's where the walled gardens come in. You have to put up those walled gardens so you have the control over the inventory and the price of that inventory that you're releasing. I think that's why, you know, we're seeing it.
Yeah, you raised a lot of really interesting points, like right there, in terms of how programmatic plays a role in this, and how unlocking, like how the value of inventory has become really relative with programmatic, especially through real-time bidding. Because I can bid on how much the brand that I'm advertising for is valuing that user based on all the different data segments that I'm layering on top of it. So if I'm really wanting to target somebody who's into red shoes, and I've got a really great data segment that's going to tell me who is into red shoes. I'm going to value that user differently, and therefore the inventory that that user is accessing differently than I would if I was just blanketing or buying an inventory source. And I think it goes back to the original question, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on it, that MediaPost posed is who knows more about the value of the inventory and the audience, the publishers or the buyers?
I think it probably depends on the publisher and the media channel and whatever. I would just say I think in linear TV, I think right now it seems to be, you know, the agencies have a little bit of the upper hand, and you know, the trading desks and whatnot on the value of that inventory. But I think that they're rapidly gaining ground on their understanding of it, and I think that that's what we're seeing in some of the walled gardens that are going up in linear TV with their data products that they're introducing in linear TV. We already have it in addressable TV with Dish and DirecTV, and they're trying to sell more of their inventory that they used to just bundle into different buckets and sell. Now moving all of that towards addressable because they could monetize it better. And now we're seeing the linear TV networks like Turner, Viacom, NBCU, all of them, you know, roll out these data products and put up these walled gardens while they're trying to understand their audience. And, you know, they are all coming in, you know, asking for our clients' data to understand more, saying, you know, bring your own data to the party and allow us to understand who you want to reach. And that's great, and it's great for our advertisers. And, you know, but I think obviously there's some concern with the privacy there, and then you have the opposing forces. So I'm an optimist, you know, generally. That, you know, might be a fault of mine, but I think that the collaboration is the only way that this gets resolved. So I think, and there is, between these two spreadsheets that are going in the opposite way, one that wants the CPMs to go up and the other that wants the CPMs to go down, there is, I think, a middle ground somewhere that we have to find that will deliver results for all parties.
Yeah, I definitely think it's a combination. There's a bunch of different data sources out there. They say first party, second party, third party. Everybody has a different perception of who their consumer is. So there's first party data where our brands know who their customer is and their customer files and who is loyal to that particular brand. And then publishers know who their audience is, who reads Yahoo News, who visits the Yahoo homepage. They know their kind of second party or their own first party data. And then from an agency perspective, we know the consumer in the online marketplace or in the TV marketplace, so across multiple inventory sources. So I know what my audience does across Yahoo, across Google, across Facebook. So it's definitely, again, a combination of all of them that you really want to understand, because we've run into challenges where our clients do their own modeling and they do their own research of who their audience is, but it's not necessarily, and they put a certain value on who they want to reach, but then when you put them in the online world, it's not necessarily the person that's going to convert online or someone who they're going to be able to influence through TV. So it's definitely understanding a holistic purview of who this audience is and how they consume their media, what's going to influence them, what their interests are. Who knows best, but I think everyone has a different perspective, so it's not one knows better, it's everything combined, I think, is the richest profile.
Jeff from Comscore said something interesting yesterday as well when he was talking about private marketplaces and walled gardens and data continuity across them. And he kind of made a call for more transparency, more accountability, more standardization. How do you guys feel about where things are right now? I think George kind of answered this question, that everyone's like wholly unsatisfied, but what specifically would you like to see change over the next year, over the next 3 years? And, you know, whether it's a consortium as a solution that spans across mediums, what do you think the solution is to be able to, for advertisers and brands to be able to not just buy, because our ability to buy inventory right now, I think it's definitely outpaced our ability to measure it. So how do we keep pace with that, and what do we need to do, or what solutions can we implement, and then what would you like to see happen over the next couple of years?
From a Razorfish perspective, programmatic is huge. I mean, we're a digital agency, but shifting from managed service to self-service is our putting our best foot forward and really trying to be more transparent, have more control, be in the platforms ourselves, and actually have our planners do the hands-on keyboarding to really understand where we're accessing the inventory, what our data costs are, and we're kind of cutting out the middlemen who are managing, who are on the managed service, cutting out kind of the different publishers to kind of manage our campaigns in silos. So I think once we kind of have it all in-house and can understand what the insights are and really what data segments are working best and what inventory segments are working best, we can translate that across multiple clients or multiple campaigns and just get a better sense of how our media is working and make it work harder and where we're placing our big bets.
Yeah, I think the challenge is in the connectivity, right, between who viewed what and what actions they take as an outcome of that. So in terms of what we need from a measurement perspective, it's really intelligence around who actually viewed the advertisement or the show, right? So we're talking about personally identifiable information coming back from the publishers, whether that's a physical address, a mobile device ID, or something else that we can tie back to actual results in the marketplace and sales.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we're actively pursuing, all different data sets that we can, from third-party data sets to breaking down the silos to getting access to the first-party data that's available so we could activate it on it, whether it's within these walled gardens or hopefully outside of the walled gardens, and then working more, I think, with the client's CRM data to make it unique, to give them a unique advantage to really, hit the audiences that they want and deliver on the goals or KPIs.
And you mentioned something there that was actually something I want to kind of like touch on, because I think it's actually a missing piece of some of these conversations, is what that infrastructure actually looks like. Salesforce just acquired Crux, and now you have a DMP sitting on top of a CRM, potentially. And what kind of measurement infrastructures are going to enable brands to be able to kind of get their hands around that type of the audience behaviors and the way that media is influencing it?
Yeah, I mean, you absolutely need a great DMP. You need a multi-channel, omni-channel DMP that can help connect consumers with all their devices and globally for a lot of our brands. So I think the move that we've seen by Salesforce, it's going with Adobe and Oracle, sort of a race to the center. And there's a lot of understanding that data creates a strategic advantage, but you need to have that device graph, you need to have the connectivity, to be able to plan effectively.
Yeah, I mean, I think the DMPs are key, and being able to, whether you build one yourself and have one internally, or whether you work with them, obviously I think that's essential to giving our clients a strategic advantage and an advantage within their category, for sure. And I think, we're trying to work with any partner that's best for the advertiser. I think that's just our approach right now. Obviously, we have some that we like better than others, but whoever they prefer, I think we work with, and that's our approach, right now. There's pros and cons to that, but it seems to be working quite well.
Yeah, there's definitely different DMPs for different clients just based on their business model and what they need, how the data's ingested, how it's analyzed, how it's sourced. But I mean, DMPs are huge, obviously, because they house all the data and kind of have one centralized place that you can ingest a ton of different sources and kind of segment those audiences and build those profiles that then you can push out to activate on. So I think it's really important to kind of have one holistic place where you can put a bunch of different data sources and have this perfect little package where you can then push it out and actually reach those consumers based on what you know about them.
So if you have the infrastructure in place and you have a great DMP and you're able to measure all of these things effectively, what then does cross-garden media activation look like, and what does success look like with that? And I'm trademarking cross-garden strategy as something for me. Nobody else can.
I mean, I think it's really confusing. It's a tough question. I think it all goes back to understanding the KPIs of the different, devices and screens and media channels, I think, themselves. And I think, we have to understand that, a lot of, different screens and media channels have their strengths, Obviously, they can be used for multiple different, ways of buying or against multiple different KPIs, but I think some of them clearly have their strengths over others. So I think ultimately, yes, we are trying to drive increased sales of our clients' product and services, but that's the ultimate KPI for all of the media channels. But what is each of the KPIs for each of them that's going to drive that one ultimate KPI? So.
And I think clients now or accounts now, businesses are having a customized tech stack to be able to measure what they need and kind of have a really robust measurement solution where they're looking at cross-channel, they're looking at multi-touch attribution, they're looking at their search, they're looking at a bunch of different pieces of their campaigns and different pieces of their business and how their media is working all together to take it. Not everything's all piped in, not everything has the same methodology, but at least you see trends and you can start to gain some insights. And I think the walled gardens is part of that. It's just another source that's coming in, and I think just comparing it to the trends you're seeing across the board to kind of make those intelligent decisions.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. I would just add that what we see is also a return to classic direct marketing approach with A/B holdout groups, making sure that we can clearly measure what is the actual impact of adding additional channel like television or social or whatever it is. That way we can know what that does in terms of sales.
That's, I think you make a great point right there, just kind of like the basics, right? And somebody actually asked me this, and I couldn't necessarily come up with a great answer, is, are A/B tests possible? I know they're possible inside of a medium. I know they're possible inside of a, like a one channel. But is it actually possible to, execute a true A/B test right now, given how much content is out there, how many different touch points there are, how many different mediums you're advertising across? Is that something that you can really execute against?
Yes.
Great.
And I think it does start and end with the data,
Yeah.
right? And I've said, the DMP is important before, but it really is. When you have a universe of, say, 10 million consumers, we can intentionally take, 1 million of those consumers and intentionally not advertise to them through a specific channel. And then when we tie that back to in-store sales, we see, okay, what was the lift that we got from each, of those different exercises?
Yeah, same for if kind of the reverse effect is if you kind of know, now through mobile and cross-channel measurement and having GPS and through some of the data providers like a Place or Place IQ, where you can actually measure in-store traffic, and then there's actually technology now that can attribute that back to media exposed. So out of all the in-store traffic that you're seeing, of that, what were you able to attribute back to media, and then seeing the lift from that as well. So definitely cause and effect, and kind of holdout groups, I think, is the best when you're having multiple sources of measurement.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, absolutely. So paint a picture of what your ideal world would look like in 5 years. If we're buying media, how are we buying media? If we're measuring it, how are we measuring it? And what is success looking like then?
We're moving towards that, hopefully being screen agnostic, being consumer first and consumer led and data driven, all the fun buzzwords, but making sure that we are putting the consumer at the forefront, understanding that they can consume content anywhere, and what device they want to, and just kind of having a holistic measurement solution. We are getting there. With the DMPs and with multi-touch attribution and different third-party vendors where we can measure as much as we can. It's just coming up with similar methodologies and counts where we can start to place the right value where it's supposed to be.
Yeah, and I would just add that marketing has changed. It used to be about a brand pushing out their message to a specific individual, and now it's changed to the point of specific individuals or consumers reaching and discovering that brand. The control really has shifted to the consumer. So when we talk about how do you plan, how do you buy, all of that, we really have to have a full understanding, clear picture of what that marketplace is, what the interactions are, how and when they occur. And yeah, it's a challenge.
I think, yeah, I agree with what these guys just said, but I think getting to true cross-screen planning and buying would be the ultimate, I think. And I will just end with kind of what, off of what Keith just said. I think, you know, everything, we've been here all week, and I think we've been talking about the science. I mean, we are deep into the science, but we started this summit with talking about the art, you know, the art of advertising and making that emotional connection to consumers. And I think that, you know, the science is great, and we ought to try and merge the science and the art as much as possible, but we have to keep the art in mind. And there's something to be said for, you know, having, you know, a great commercial creative and broadcasting it out to the world and announcing that I have this new product or new service and I want everyone in the nation to know about it. And no eyeball is being wasted in that, you know. And I think that that still is an effective form of advertising. And I think a lot of that can be done through contextual-based targeting still. So I still think that there's room for that, and that's important for brands to have, although I think all of what we're talking about here in the science and bringing that to is important as well. So I think, like I said, I'm an optimist, and I think there's room for everything. So hopefully we'll see it evolve.
Yeah, we can go to questions.
Sure.
Or we can move it directly into the roundtable, because you covered it all, but we're going to do a roundtable on this very topic at the end. Evan and panel, thanks very much.
Thank you.
So